the New York office is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, which is the occasion that we took to start this conference that we titled Step by Step, Feeling Out the Ground, or Feeling the Ground. It is a quotation by Rosa Luxemburg from the manuscript about the Russian Revolution, and it comes exactly after the paragraph where we always take the famous quotation that we also have on our tote bags, which are there for free, about the freedom that is always and exclusively the freedom of those who think differently. And then she comes to the new government, the revolutionary government that is feeling out the ground and developing their policies step by step, and actually going in uncharted ground. And that's a situation that leftists always face, because we always want to go to a better world that does not exist yet, so we have to go to uncharted ground. And that's a bit the theme that we want to put in place for this conference. That's why we chose this phrase as a title. And of course we want to take the occasion of our 10th anniversary to talk a bit about where the office comes from, what we have done in the past years, and look out what are the tasks for the office, for the foundation, and for the left in general are in these times. We will start with a little conversation with my predecessors, the founding co-directors of this office, Albert Scharenberg and Stefanie Ehmsen, and the vice president of Rosa Luxemburg New York Incorporate, Gabi Kikut, who is also director of the Center for, of the Central Tasks Unit in the Foundation's headquarters in Berlin. Then we have, following up, two panels. You can see it in the program. There are copies of the program outside, and also another housekeeping remark. Everyone who shows up, please sign in the sign-in sheets. If you are not listed yet, please fill your name in, so that we can prove that this event is really happening to our donors. So we have two panels in the morning with a short coffee break in between. After that we will serve lunch, short lunch buffet here, and then we will go together, I propose, to the field trip in the afternoon with Sam Stein on city development and gentrification in Manhattan. That will start at Hudson Yards. And then we unfortunately, we had to change the program because we intended to have a cooperation with Goethe Institute and Samantha Hill, Drusilla Cornell, and Shaila Ben Saib, and Parallel Lives, Hannah Arendt and Rosa Luxemburg. Unfortunately, Drusilla felt ill, and we have to postpone this panel to next year. Instead, there will be a screening of Margareta von Troller's film Rosa Luxemburg in our office in 275 Madison Avenue. You find that in the updated program too. Tomorrow we start with a field trip at 9:30 at the New York Public Library, and David, the director of the International Climate Justice Program, pardon me, will lead us through Manhattan and talk about climate change and politics. It's a very rough title that I just invented, but and then we will come there. After that, you will have to figure out lunch on your own, and we will come back here at 2 o'clock. No, sorry, at 2 o'clock. for another 2 panels, and then finally the reception in the evening at 7 p.m. with greetings from Gesine Lötsch, member of German Bundestag, the Deputy Consul General of Germany in New York, and the keynote speech by Sarah Nelson. So without further ado, oh, by the way, if you have any questions, those people who were the name tags are the staffers of our office who also prepared this conference, and you can ask them every question that is necessary. And then without further ado, I invite the first panel, which is not a panel, but a conversation round. Please. So you have the advantage that you can see us very well. We have more problems to see you, but that is what often happens when you are on the stage. I took this, we thought we'd take this opportunity to start with a view back to how it all started, and of course the closest idea we have is to ask the people who were around, and Gabi at this time, maybe she can say that, was responsible in the headquarters for the foundation of this, or the formation of this program. And yeah, it was a time when Rosa Luxemburg Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung kind of exploded and opened a lot of offices around the world. So what was the situation at this time? How did it come to pass, Gabi?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here again. We already shared some stories yesterday evening and this morning about opening this office 10 years ago. And even though I'm not part of the international department anymore, I still feel very attached to this office, and I guess we all be. So it's great to be back again. Yes. Talking about the expansion of the international work back in 2010, actually already we started with the first works for the New York office. Well, the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung opened its first 4 offices in 2003. That was Moscow, Warsaw, Johannesburg, and Sao Paulo. And after that, for another 4 years, out of financial reasons, there were no more new offices. And then in 2007, Mexico City was opened, and the big expansion actually started in 2008. And from 2008, and I looked it up, until 2012, we actually opened 12 new offices. So New York City was one of them. And in 2012, together with New York, we also opened up the new office in Athens, in Greece, and in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So we had quite exciting times back then. Yeah, and there were different reasons and different criteria why to go to one place or another. Of course, there were like political reasons and criteria. Do we have a partner base in the country, the region where we want to go to? Can we actually be an added value to organizations, partners back then? And is the work that we were doing there also a value for our international work? There were also legal criteria that we had to learn sometimes on the hard way. Is it possible to open an office in another country, to get a registration, to hire people? This is all a lot of bureaucracy that needs to be checked. And I mean, German political foundations are quite unique thing. It's not always that easy to explain it, and to get a stable legal base for an office. And there were financial criteria also. We do have 2 donors, the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Economic Development and Cooperation. And actually it's the last one that gives us the biggest share of the money. And this money is actually supposed to be spent in the so-called developing countries. So we have much less money for work in Western Europe and North America. So that's always that's also a thing that yeah. That we had to have in mind. And there was also back then actually a question of concept, because in 2012 we then had 17 offices, and actually 15 of them, they were regional or country offices. So they were at one place and then working in the country or in the region where they were located in, and they were covering the political landscape there. And actually it was the Brussels office that we opened in 2009 that kind of stepped out of this scheme, because it wasn't an office for Belgium. It was an office that worked in some Western European countries, but it was also an office that was working on the EU and EU politics. And that was a totally new approach. And after 2009 already the idea was there, okay, we need to go to the US, we need to go to North America and work there. But it was after Brussels that we thought about a new concept for an office that could be both work in North America and then also be an office for the United Nations. So it's where the ideas behind it and behind the expansion.
Okay, yeah, it was a time that sometimes seems already really far away. I mean, 10 years out.
Glad to be here. Welcome everybody. It seems so far away, even though it's only a decade. But politically the landscape wasn't good at all, as we all know. But it has deteriorated and accelerated, I mean, the deterioration at a breathtaking pace. If you go back to 2011 or 12, it wasn't that long ago that the first black president got elected in the United States, and people were very excited about that and thought this might move people and move the country into a better direction. At the same time, though, the country was really struck hard by the mortgage crisis of 2008 and hadn't recovered. I mean, the country, on top of it, the government was affected, but not that much. I mean, people were affected. Millions were thrown out of the houses, were basically stripped of the little they had saved or called their own. So you could already tell it wasn't all good. But still, with the Obama presidency, and even more important from our perspective, from a left perspective, with Occupy Wall Street. In September, I think on September 17, I think it was, in 2011, Occupy Wall Street started, and that was an amazing movement that really changed the outlook of the US left and the reach of the US left amazingly. And I do recall that because I was working as a journalist at a monthly, and I immediately, when that came up, wrote an essay about it, and I titled it The Rebirth of the US Left. Because I very well recall the time before that, forgive me for saying that, there was no US left. It was so tiny and so very sectarian from my perspective that, you know, it didn't have any meaning for society. It didn't have a plan of what to do with society. There was mostly there were squabbles within this tiny left, and you know, the worst person was always the one sitting right to the right of you, not the ruling class, or not even the Democratic Party for that matter. It was really, and it had been for a long time, I would say at least since the 90s, the US left was in very bad shape, but Occupy Wall Street really opened a window of opportunity, and it was amazing. When I came to the US at the end of 2011, there was still the occupation going on, and it wasn't at a high point anymore, but still, and there were so many people involved and politicized by Occupy Wall Street, bringing back to the public discourse the issue of social inequality. And that hadn't been there for quite a long time. The tiny US left mostly was discussing about how bad US imperialism was and what the latest bad thing was. But the issues that were pressing the working class were not really out there anywhere, I must say, almost. And you didn't have gatherings of the US left. You had the Left Forum, which was fairly tiny at that time, but with Occupy Wall Street, this really changed. And many people, young people in particular, became politicized and became active. And if you look back from today's perspective, and look at the US left, you can really feel the impact, because in my opinion, the Bernie Sanders campaign wouldn't have been possible without Occupy Wall Street, because basically, I mean, Occupy Wall Street was mostly an anarchist movement, but people learn, so they got involved with institutionalized politics to a certain degree, or many of the activists, the leading activists did, and what did they run into? They ran into Bernie Sanders for a number of reasons that I don't think I have to explain to a left New York audience. But that was really maybe not a game changer for society, but definitely for the US left. And the subsequent growth of the Democratic Socialists of America, I think 20-fold or something in membership, but also a number of other organizations, more or less loosely aligned people. So I think 10 years ago it was really, or 11 years ago, that was really a window of opportunity that opened up so many doors for the US left, and since then, not so much the last 2 or 3 years, but for a number of years the US left would rise and also have, even if small, but some impact, I think, on public discourse, and in particular with Occupy Wall Street and the aftermath. Now, only just a very brief look to Europe also. If you look back 10 years in Europe, there was one far-right government in place, and it had been in place only for a short period of time, and that was Hungary, Viktor Orban. And the far-right parties, for the most part, were small or tiny. It was all dominated mostly by center-right, sometimes center-left parties, but let's call them the middle-of-the-roaders. If you compare that to today, where in Hungary you have a well-established authoritarian regime that cannot be challenged legally by the opposition anymore. Poland has shifted to the far right. Now with recent elections we see Sweden, we see the neo-fascists govern Italy, and we all saw the results in France, where Marine Le Pen polled more than 40% of the vote in the runoff election. So I bring that up only to show you how much things have changed on the other side of the Atlantic also. And this is pretty much in sync with the rise of the Trump movement, which actually had started already back then with the Tea Party movement, which basically was the foundation of Trump or Trumpism. But back then it was exciting that new things happened and that there was sort of a new beginning for the US left. Nowadays I'm afraid that the table has turned and that we are facing very different challenges. Not so much reorganizing the left and looking how we can move ahead in terms of influencing society, but more in terms of what do we have to do in order to fight the rise of the far right, which, and I'm closing with that, is not restricted to the United States or Europe, but is a global movement. And I do not have the time, but of course there are structural reasons to the rise of the far right that are always political, as we know. But at this time is really, I think, the challenge of our days to find ways to reach beyond the usual suspects or your own bubble, and to actually come up with sound strategies that will be able to beat back or to fight back the ascendancy and the rise to power, the global rise to power actually of the far right.
Yes, thank you, Albert, for this vivid picture. We actually will have time to talk about how to fight the rise of the far right in the second panel today. Before we come to the panels, I also want to ask Stefanie, what in this situation, what was the concept for this office, which is a difficult task combining the UN and North America, meaning not only the US but also Canada and the international work. So what was the concept that you started with?
Yeah, first of all, also good morning, everybody. And also for me, it's a very special moment after 10 years or even more, because we took some time to prepare this office, and yesterday we were sharing anecdotes, but today we want to analyze and strategize. So having a concept, of course, is very important. So you're coming as the branch of a German foundation working with public money to the US, working on North America, meaning the US and Canada, and pretty much every global issue, that is out there, because we were linked to the United Nations. So that's a lot. How do you pick and choose? So where do you focus on? That is very important and was one of our major questions starting the office. First of all, I think it's important that you don't duplicate. You don't duplicate what is already there. You don't do what the left in the United States can do, and maybe can even do better than a German office coming along. We wanted to create a hub for left transatlantic exchange and progressive international politics. And also to provide left perspectives on the US and Canada and global issues, and to provide this analysis importantly also to the German audience. So that's why we translated a lot of our publications, so that the left in Germany gets left perspectives on the US that usually might not be there. So how did we pick our focal points? We always started with analyzing the situation, like Albert did right now, and then we were trying to find where can we make a difference. So where does it matter whether we work on the topic or not? And then where can we make a difference in terms of analysis, discourse, and mobilization? And for example, we hosted 2 big international gatherings where we tried, or we wanted to strategize together with people from all across the world, one of which was mapping socialist strategies, and the second one was fighting the far right. So we figured, that one of our major focal points can be to create networking that otherwise would not be possible if we wouldn't host it. Then I'm just going to mention a few topics that we were focusing on, where we are working both on the North American side, but also on the global side. So we were had projects in both programs on the same topics. One was housing and rents. So we started hosting the Right to the City Roundtable with housing activists from the US, Canada, and Europe. which had a benefit for these activists that are usually working locally, but they the United Nations. And we started also a publication series on housing and city politics. So a second focal point was colonial and racist legacy, which of course is of crucial importance still to the affected communities, but also I would say to everybody in a different way. On the UN side, we started working with Madre on the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. So we work with indigenous women across the world, including the US and Canada. Also, we started working on racism in the US and had, for example, regular events at the Left Forum, which took place here, to Jodie College. Two of the biggest events that we hosted were on the 50th anniversary on the March of Washington on Jobs and Freedom. That took place at the Scharenberg Center, and the keynote was given by Dick Gregory. And the second one was on the 50th anniversary on the murder of Malcolm X. That had a lot of great speakers around, including Tariq Ali and Sonia Sanchez. So on this third focal point I want to mention and stress is the working with unions, and there especially unions in climate. We started being part of the Trade Unions for Energy Democracy that was founded by Sean Sweeney, and first at Cornell University, then shifted to CUNY. I think that is still a very, very important project. Climate change being the issue of our days, and the argument of jobs that is utilized by fossil fuel industries. So this project is trying to counter that by focusing on the concept of public ownership. And this is the working with unions on the UN program, and we also had started a union project on the North American program together with the UCLA Labor Center and Kent Wong. So the so-called tri-national labor meeting, so the US, Canada, and Mexico came together there. There were also a lot of other important issues like peace, for example. Already back then, international politics, when Trump came to power, one of the first events that we hosted was on international politics, because everybody else was focusing on the domestic side, but we said we just want to have our eyes already on the international development. And women's issues, working along with the Commission on the Status of Women, always hosting events there, LGBTQ also. So just to mention a few, to give you an idea how we approached, finding our topics, always trying to make a difference, always trying to find something that is not already there yet, and having a strong focus on publications that can be easily accessed. Our publications are free, which is a big advantage, and also translating them for the German audience or the other way around sometimes. So I think I will stop here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, thank you so much. Because really, I think it gave us a setting from where we come from. Of course, in the past 4 years, we have strived to follow up this path. A lot of the events that you mentioned, we are continuing. We added something to it, but of course we had a difficult time in the last 2 years here, and we have kind of an almost new team since I took office, which organized this conference splendidly, but there will be time for thank yous at the end. We had an idea that we might exchange also some episodes here, but we are late in time and we don't want to delay the whole program further. That's why I thank you, and I also want to thank you generally for the work that you have started here. You as co-directors, Gabi in Berlin, and I also want to mention a person that is always in the background, Till Bender, who was always around at this process of the office and is kind of the good spirit of it. Thank you. And we come without a break to the first panel that is moderated by Stefan Liebig. Stefan Liebig is a new institution in our office. For the first time, the New York office has a fellow, a honorific fellow. And Stefan